Uh, waiting for myself. 30 seconds behind. Let's see the audio. Is it okay? Yeah. Audio is fine. Yeah. Okay. Cool. You excited? Do you have your camera on hand?
I've got my camera to my left, my notepad on my crotch, pencil in right hand. I'm ready to go.
All right. Okay. So yeah, this is not a light just for everyone else who might be in this. This is not a Lightroom like the usual shenanigans. This is more of a
This is teaching the young noob.
teaching anyone who's interested. In fact, like during the process of this, I had to really rediscover a lot of the science and math because like today I was like in algebra, how do you translate things to the other side of the equal sign when you have like powers? And I was like, I can't remember. I genuinely can't remember shifting any. And then I was like, oh yeah, if you do the triangle thing with like the speed equals distance over time, and then you just do it that way, you can just like apply that to powers and stuff. I was like, okay, yeah. And then ended up going so deep in, like I started looking at the theories at 4. What time is it now? It's 8. That's 4 hours of looking at mathematical equations. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So the idea is going through the science, the math, and the art of photography, because most people just assume photography is pretty much, right? Even on the iPhone, they assume that people have a lot of likes. And
I'm gonna say you should throw in a disclaimer. This is not for Android and iPhone cameras.
oh, this is for Android and iPhone cameras. This is for everything. I'm teaching you about life right now. This is gonna be like all the way in. This is gonna be so.
Is this gonna be about birds and the bees and everything?
We've entered the realm of infinite possibility. LGI, let's go. Forgot that. So this is what is that? This is not that. This is more. This is
Photo
that is so distracting. Photography fundamentals. There's something wrong with my keyboard. What is it that every time I go live something goes wrong? Anyway, this is photography fundamentals. This isn't photography 101. Photography 101, like I've looked at the courses, I've seen the university lectures. Those are really simple. Like the amount of stuff that they teach you in photography at university isn't really, I don't think that any of that is usually practically of any practical use. It's good to know, but it's not good to have. I mean, it's good to have if, I don't know. I find going to school for photography, unless you want to do the art theorem and the science and the math and exploring things behind it, I find that you're better off just starting your own photography company with the same amount of money that you would going to uni, and you would actually be better off that way by just joining photography groups and watching people on others. Imitation is the best way to learn, especially with art. You start by imitating. You're trying to figure out how they took the shot and like how they captured that scene, and then you try to imitate, and then you build your own style from that. That's usually the best way to go about things, but they don't teach you about that. They always teach you about like how glass operates and how you can frame a photo, and just things that are just like BS, barely Superman, guidelines on things that generally will then be phased out by other newer technologies, which is why I find the courses a bit useless, which is why I'm doing this. It's to educate anyone who's interested in the fundamentals of photography. That is the basis. That's the baseline. That's the introduction. How are we feeling so far?
It's going in. It's going in.
Okay. All right. All
Don't
right.
put any of that down because that's just an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
So,
waiting for the real goodies.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So for the most part, most people want to know about this, right? They see the dials on the DSLR and they're like, what are,
WTF, mate.
what are any of these things, right? What are
WTF.
and inside a DSLR, this is what it looks like. So if you go back to this, right? DSLR, that's the first thing. There's acronyms everywhere. DSLR. This is one part. This is the second part. It's simply digital, single lens reflex. Now, what is a single lens reflex? Back in the day, cameras were actually really they were interesting in the sense that what you see wasn't exactly what you got from a photo. They had dual lenses, and the first lens was effectively like a what's it called? The thing on a submarine, periscope. Yes.
Periscope.
Yeah.
Periscope? Periscope or
Yeah.
periscope?
Periscope. Yeah. I think so. Right. So you'd have one that you look at the world as like that's your view, right? Your view of the world. And then the camera had a different system. Those were dual reflex systems. So like sometimes what would happen is you would look at your view, and then you would take a picture, and then you go to the studio, you have that processed, and then you realize that your lens is actually out of focus, and your picture is pretty much unusable. So like they had dual lens systems, and then eventually, I think it was 1979. I could be wrong about that. I forgot to write down the date. The first single lens reflex camera came out, and it revolutionized all of that because what you see was effectively what you got. And digital, that's the SLR part. The digital part is the transition from having a film camera to a digital camera, which is and I think the first digital camera used it was a camera that it's like the size of like the old school computers, and it wrote to disk. And then the next one, I remember the next phase of cameras, like phase of quote unquote digital cameras, wrote to CD. And then like they were really popular in the well, I say popular, they were really like futuristic in the 90s. And then now we have writing to SD cards and micro SD cards and QHD cards, like all the different cards which are flash-based technology. That's where we are, and flash-based being electrons moving around rather than a disk writing like lasers. So that's where we are in terms of cameras, and this is the fantastic beast that we have now. And most people look at this and they're like, "Oof, I can't with this. This is too much." So let's break it down. It's actually really simple. It really is not too bad.
Quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Didn't you put your computer on charge?
Yeah, good shout. I thought I was I was plugged in.
At the top right, I'm like,
Yeah. Can you imagine? Just like I'm just
talking like this revolutionary bit where I'm like, I'm finally getting in, it just dies out like, and then what?
So this is what a DSLR like looks like. For most people, they get a kit lens, and I'll go into lenses, and then they have all these fancy dials, and they don't know what they do.
The one that I've got doesn't have half that many dials.
Yeah,
buttons on it. So mine looks like a lot simpler.
Yeah. So you have there's effectively 3 tiers for DSLRs. You have the consumer models, which are for the like basic user. Like they have no idea about photography, and they just want a good camera. Yeah.
They want to get a good picture without half the effort.
literally they're going on holiday. They went to Curry's or PC World, and they're like, I need a camera. And some guy in Curry's and PC World upsells them
I
these,
got a deal for you.
these
Very
crazy
small boy.
cameras that they will never really need, right? And then you got the, what I like to call prosumer, or the um prosumer. Let's call them prosumers, because these are consumers, or the enthusiast photographers. These are photographers that are really interested in photography, but aren't using that as a means for business, or they are not using photography as a way to facilitate. It's more of a hobby than it is a profession. Then you got the uh, photographers, who are like, they're driven by their art there, and their art is what drives them. Those are the pro guys, and this is a pro camera. So I gave you like, I gave you the meat on the bread. I think, wait, the D810, yeah, the D810 is a pro level camera, and there's the different components to it. So let me add a new layer, and we can go through it. It might sound really obvious, but this part is the lens.
Wait. Yeah, reel it back a bit. You're going a bit too fast for me now.
It's that part's the lens. This part is what's called as the body.
Mhm.
The thing up here, that's called a hot shoe.
Hot shoe.
Yeah.
What is it? Nike, Adidas? You got to give me specifics.
So the reason why it's called a hot shoe mount is
Is it because of the way it slots in or something?
You're almost there. So like back in the day with older cameras, right? They needed, because of the cameras were tailored to very specific functions, right? Cameras are not like the way they are today. A camera, you can buy a DSLR today and it's going to have 4K video, and it's going to have like night photography and day photography. Like, cameras had to be really tailored. Like, you had to really plan your life around the photo shoot, because whether it was using magnesium in the flash, or you needed to so the reason why it's called hot, it's a hot shoe now, is the accessories that go on it, like, they tend to fire, like in terms of flash, they tend to fire instantly, right? They're active, they're hot. Before, you had like cold apparatus where you'd have like a light that would come, like, that would slowly build up the light in the room.
It's
And
essentially like back in those days, it would be like lighting gunpowder. It would start to like fizz
yeah,
up, build up, and then go poof. Whereas the hot
be like,
shoe is like
it's
bang
just,
straight away.
it's gone. It's gone.
Mhm.
That's
I got
it. On this side, you got the shutter button.
Oh yeah, the silver button, the standout
So
button.
on your camera, it's a silver button.
Mhm.
So the shutter button is the thing that opens the shutter, and I'll go into what the shutter is soon. Do not worry. This is, let me change the color of this, so it's just easier. You are, mate. Oh, because it's, yeah, this is the lens release. This is
Oh yeah, to pop out. Mhm.
manual or autofocus.
Oh yeah, I see it. It's a switch.
It's a switch, so that so some lenses, like, okay, so if you look at this one has a dial. The lens itself has a dial. It has a manual /M/A or M. M/A means that you can use the lens as a manual or autofocus lens, or M, which is manual only. So this lens has that. This is a very advanced lens, but most lenses and the older lenses don't have that. So you can have manual or autofocus, because inside here there's an electric connection when you screw in the lens, so that the lens knows that it's it's a lens that you can do autofocus on, because specifically for Nikon, they've had this connector bit is called an F mount, the Nikon F mount, and they've had this for over 30 years. So you can have lenses from 30 years ago on a new camera. So that's why you have this particular one on DSLRs. That's the reasoning. This thing is called a lens hood. Lens hood. The purpose of the lens hood is to protect the lens from sunlight.
I know that one. I remember this one from Tokyo.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got the lens hood, and you got this. This is the this is just called the, let's see, the mode switch or mode dial. Dial.
Yeah. That's it.
Oh, this one's fun. I'll come to that one again. This is the flash.
The thing that pops up, yeah. But this one that I have doesn't have that.
Pop-up flash. That one should have a pop-up flash. A Pentax KX.
Let me see.
All right. So if you look at your dial, and if it has something like this.
Yeah. That's the one I literally just went to now.
Yeah. So if it has, then yours has a pop-up flash.
Okay, it does. All right.
Yeah. And you see this button. There should be a button like that on the front of the camera.
Front of the camera.
Yeah. It might be the front or the side. This is a Nikon, by the way, so it might be different. So it should be a lightning bolt somewhere.
Yeah. It's, you know where you would like to select the pictures to look at them. It's the bottom button.
Oh, okay. So fair enough. Yeah, different positions. Different cameras have different positions. That is the button to trigger and open the flash. Like, that's how you manually force the pop-up flash to come up.
Okay. Manual flash.
And when you hold it down, you see the plus and minus. That is it's called flash bracketing. No. And we'll come to bracketing later as well. So we got shutter, bracketing. Again, it's starting to get a little bit complicated. And then you have a few more dials. Does yours have a front and back dial?
No, it just has a single dial.
When I say dial, I mean it's like teeth. It's a teeth gear thing that you can spin.
Yeah, on the top. Yeah, there's only one. There's only one. Is it? Like, if I was to hold the camera, you got the one at the top. Then as you look at it, where you take pictures, there's another one, but that's for zooming in on the pictures.
Oh, so okay, so you see the one that you were calling for zooming in for the pictures. Mm-hmm. That one is the dial I'm talking about.
Okay.
That one is called let's call it, I guess, what can we call it? I don't know. I can't remember the terminology. So it should be, if I remember correctly, it's so where the shutter button is, it should be behind it, like on the other side of it, right?
What, the one that I was talking about?
The one you spin clockwise or anti-clockwise, like infinitely.
Oh, the one with all the modes and stuff. It's behind, yeah.
No, not the one with the modes. It doesn't have anything. You just spin it.
Oh,
it looks like a gear.
Yeah. Yeah, the zoomy one. Yeah, that's on the back of the camera. If we say the front of the camera is the lens and stuff, it's on the back.
It's on the back of the camera. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, some cameras have two of those.
Okay.
And that is a mode control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's called a mode control, because different cameras have different numbers of these. Adobe, what are you doing? Don't need you right now. Thank you. So that's pretty much it. This is pretty much all you need to know. These are extra. Let me just take this on the side off. These are extra accessories. Not everything has it, but most tend to have a USB. Some tend to have a HDMI. Some have mic in. Some have audio in. FX. So FX means full frame. This is just telling you that this is a pro level camera, full frame. Well, not necessarily, right? It's complicated. The FX is a full frame camera, and we'll talk about frames in a moment. But this is pretty much what a DSLR is and the functions behind it. So any questions before we kind of move off of this picture?
No, pretty much got it all. Like this is like stuff I can't really write down without having a diagram of myself. So I mean,
yeah,
if I need anything, I can always go back and look at this.
Yeah, and my advice is you can always go to the camera manufacturer's website, enter in the model number, which is this thing. For anyone else who doesn't know where the model number is, and then just look for the manual. And the manual, the second page, the first page is usually the like disclaimer, like don't put your camera in water or whatever. And then the second page is usually a full description of the camera's features. So if you're ever really interested in like all the things that your camera has that might not necessarily be on this picture, that's always worth looking at. So that's that. Okay. And before we talked about the lens, this is the lens. We know the lens, it's nice and beautiful, and we get this, right? This is the science behind it. The lens acts this in a similar way to the way the eye works, where if I bring this into another layer, let's say you have a human here. The human at the end of the retina will be upside down, just because of the way convex the cornea and the cornea operates. Light comes in, and it's diffracted, it's reflected, and light effectively bends once it enters the cornea, and you can see this. Your brain automatically rotates the image, but that's how the world is actually is. The world is seen upside down, and the brain rotates it. The same thing happens with the camera lens. The light comes into the camera lens, and you have like similar things like the cornea. You have the it goes all the way down to the sensor, which is all the way back here, that is what would be the sensor. And the sensor would then act the way the brain does by reflecting the photo and adjusting it, and then like compensating for the colors. But obviously with the eye, it's a very complicated thing. You have light coming in, and there's effectively 3 channels. There's the red channel, there's the blue channel, and the green channel. The red and the blue are like, it's like red, blue, and then like green is like a smaller piece of that. Mainly because green is like the least important thing that we need, because a lot of the earth is green. So the brain is effectively built to kind of remove green, which is why when you're walking, you never really notice the grass unless you're looking for it, or anything green. Like green is the color that is like the brain effectively throws away, which is why in cinematography you have a green screen, because green is the one color that we just tend to ignore. So if like the green screen isn't rotoscoped out properly, your brain still doesn't care about like the extra green in the space. That's the biology behind it. So that's why lenses look the way they do. They are art imitating life. Is that the term? Yeah, that's the term, right? Art imitating life. So that's pretty much what we have. But the differences start to come when you start to look at the camera itself, because how does the camera then how does the camera decide, is this the right one? Let me just check. Okay, cool. How does the camera go from seeing an image here and then writing it to the SD card, which is like on the other side here? That's the cool part. That for me is the part that I really enjoy. So let's assume we got the camera like this, right? You got the most sexy man on the planet. He's just posing, striking the pose. This is the lens. That's the lens. That's the camera body. And we got it like this, right? So this image comes in like this. If it was just the way like upside down, oops, head, and that's how it was, because there's a if we were assuming this was just the lens on its own, there's nothing in the camera, that this is what the camera would look like, and it would not be able to process that information well, mainly because, like, what do you do with this information? It's useless to us, because how does the person looking through this viewfinder, right? There's a viewfinder right here, and that was the other part. Viewfinder is this thing, right? How does someone looking into the viewfinder see the world in the right way? Because these are not electronic viewfinders. These are real life viewfinders. So the sensor sees things this way, but there's other elements in the camera that allow us to see life and light in the way that it should be, right? So the first thing that's in there is a mirror. There's a mirror here, right? The mirror bounces the light, this reflection, this upside down reflection, it bounces the inside reflection upwards, right? And the reason why the DSLRs and SLRs have that shape is because they have, in the case of your camera, a pentaprism, which is a 5-shaped piece of glass, where the light that's coming up, goes right, and then goes into the into your eyes. So it's flipped. It's diffracted and refracted and flipped so that you see effectively what you would see with your eyes, right? And it reflects different light. The reason why it's a 5, it's not just another mirror reflecting back. It's because light comes in at different wavelengths, and blue light will come in at a specific wavelength, and red light will come in into a wavelength of its own, and it's got special coating that allows you to get all the light that comes in through that glass into your eyes, so that you see the world in a way that you see with your eyes. That's the magic behind how that works. So if you ever wondered like how that chain of events happens, that's how. If you ever wondered, I doubt anyone has ever wondered this.
They just push the button and it comes up on the screen. It's like,
yeah. So going back to that example, right? We got the guy here. So now we've understood how you see the world, but now it's just to understand how the camera sees the world, right? So you got the world here, and honestly, when you break it down, anything, right? What we see is just reflected light. It's not the things themselves. We only ever just see the light that is being reflected off of something. So that's why you can't see in a dark room, because there's no light. And some creatures see ultraviolet light, and it's just a frequency, but we only see infrared light. Is it infrared?
Yeah, it must be infrared.
Yeah.
No, is it infrared what you see?
I can't wait. I may have
Infrared is like remotes and stuff. That's what they use infrared.
What? Oh no, yeah, that's correct. That infrared is, what do we see? Doesn't matter. We
see light. We see
light. What is the name? What's the name of that light? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Let's not go back into AS biology. So the lens, the light goes into the lens, and behind the lens there's a matrix, and this matrix is literally just red, green, blue on each one, right? This is the effectively This is the mosaic filter that separates all the colors. Okay, so here's the example, right? You got your camera with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you take a picture,
Right.
yeah, and anyone at home can do this as well. If you review the picture, and I think if you press up, when you're reviewing the picture, when you go into the review mode, you should have a histogram that has the different colors.
Press up.
I think it's up on yours.
Let's try menu. Nothing in menu.
No, so if you go to the review, if you press the play button,
I'm on that.
And try pressing up.
No.
Pressing OK.
No.
Huh.
Oh, if I press down, it's giving me some options.
There we go. Does it show you a histogram?
No.
Okay.
Give me digital filter, resize, cropping, index, raw development. Raw development?
Mm-mm.
No.
It's just a graph. Pentax.
And DPOF. DPOF.
All right, let's see. I'm just gonna quickly read manual. Let's see.
Oh, if I press info, it gives me all the
info. Okay, and you give you the histogram.
It gives me the red, green, blue, and white.
That's pretty much it, right? White is a collection of everything, and then red would be like the red here, the blue here, and the green, right? That's how you see that's how the channels get seen. So that's how that works. And that's a really important part, because the reds, the blues, and the greens are what fundamentally make what we see as human beings, right?
No.
And then behind that, there's the image sensor, which is the actual sensor, which collects all of this information and puts it in a readable, into like machine readable code, because this up to here, this is analog, right? And then the rest can be digital. So this is how it digitizes it, and then it goes through a buffer, like all the way through the buffer to your SD card. 4 GB, because this is old school, right? This is the old days. So yeah, that's how it works, right? Your sensor, the lens sees light, the light gets past the RGB mosaic filter. That information is then passed down to the image sensor, which goes all the way down to the buffer. There's steps alongside that, but I'm just skipping through so that we don't spend like 2 days on sensors. And then that then gets sent to the processor, which then writes it to the card. That's pretty much it. That's how the lens works. And that's that is up to now, that's the mechanical engineering and the bio stuff of how cameras work. The next thing is actually the important thing, right? The what is the sensor? So earlier I said there's 3 users. There's consumer, average consumer, prosumer, and the professional, right? Professional photographer. And with this, it comes with the reason why different cameras cost different prices, and some cameras can be really expensive, is because of the sensor size, right? The sensor size, you have full frame, which is 35 millimeter, it models the old 35 millimeter cameras. You got APS-C. So there's actually two types of APS-C. Let me just add another one. There's 2. There's Nikon, the one that Nikon follows, and Nikons and Canons. Canon. So Nikons are 1.5 times crop. So imagine you had a scene, which is why I'm using this illustration, right? The sensor on a full frame would see this much information, right? The first square. That's how much light would be able to come into the camera. That's the amount of information that would be seen in a camera with a full frame sensor. With the crop sensor, which are everything that aren't full frame, which is this is 1 times, and everything else is multiplication of that. It's 1.5 times zoom, right? So this information would be what the APS-C sensor would see. And your camera is an APS-C sensor, and it's at 1.5 crop zoom. Canon, for some strange reason, in the early 90s, had 1.6 times crop, which is the reason why for the prosumer line, Canon cameras tend to not take as good stills as the still photography as the Nikon cameras, but they are still stellar cameras because of their processors and their touchscreen, and they are more functional cameras. But in terms of image quality, because of the times magnification, they tend to perform not as crisply as the Nikons. And then you have the Micro Four Thirds, which is the new set of cameras. These are the Olympus fancy cameras that you see people on Instagram that look like the older cameras from 1979, or like the Canon AE1. Like these are like the old cameras. So Micro Four Thirds tend to be 2 times crop of a full frame camera. And then you got the CX7, which is 2.7, and an iPhone. Just since we're being inclusive to everything, right? An iPhone is like so. This is I'm modeling this after the iPhone, I guess. Let's see. What number do I have? Let's say, yeah, the iPhone 5S has a sensor size which is 7.6 times a full frame camera. And this is the reason why megapixels are a thing, right? Everyone assumes that you have a lot of megapixels that your camera is better, right? You can have a 20 megapixel iPhone, but because of the size of this, so the megapixels effectively, these sensors are, like I showed earlier, are infinite grids that have, like, these are grids that are compressed, and the megapixels are the number of square boxes that fit within that sensor. So a 20 megapixels is a 20 megapixels, 20 mega.
If we also think of it like a TV, or like 720 pixels, 10.
Exactly. But with 720, the problem with that metric is 720 by 720 is actually 720 by 480, which is the ratio, but it doesn't give you the amount of objects in a screen. But with this, it's just like the number of squares that you can fit into that sensor. So if you have a 20 megapixel 20 megapixel iPhone, you can fit 20 of these blocks into that small 7.6 times crop sensor. So that's why you can have an iPhone that is 20 megapixels, and you have a full frame camera which is 20 megapixels, but the boxes that are in the iPhone and the boxes that are in the full frame, they will be the full frame would have a significantly larger box than the iPhone. So you may have the same amount of boxes in the square, but in the, well, it's a rectangle really, same amount of boxes in the rectangle, but the full frame boxes will be larger and can process a lot more information, which means that it has a higher resolution. That is megapixels in a nutshell. And it's the most frustrating thing because camera makers usually sell these things as, oh, you have 50 megapixels. It's a 50 megapixel camera. But how big is the sensor size though? Right? You can have a 50 megapixel camera and it has like a 10 times 10 times full frame zoom, full frame sensor, and those 50 megapixels really don't really like that. Those 50 megapixels are probably worse than a 12 megapixel iPhone camera, if that makes sense.
Well, now that I think about it, it's like 20 megapixels. It's like, okay, you look at it in that sort of size, but then as you start to zoom in, it's like, the fuck am I even looking at now?
Exactly. It's just like you're gonna have 20 megapixels in a scene size that big. What is your life? All right.
Essentially, getting the 20 megapixel picture and putting it on a 1080 display, you'd be looking at garbage.
Yeah, and just for reference, IMAX would be around that. It's 0.49.
IMAX needs to fucking chill. What the hell?
Yeah, IMAX is beast. And then obviously you got stuff like this is pretty much it. This is why the sensor is important. The sensor is the brain. The sensor is the end all be all. Like there's like this, without the sensor, much of photography doesn't work. And now that you know the glimpse of the sensor, so this is the Holy Trinity, the Triforce.
I know what this is.
This is the Triforce, right? And this is the sensor. Right? The sensor is what when the Triforce combines.
Okay.
You get like everything revolves around the sensor, right? The sensor is like the brain. It's the body. It's the thing that makes photography, because that's the thing that does all the processing. But to complement the sensor, the things that make photography, there's the three gods, the three goddesses, right? And each has their special power. The first goddess is ISO. Now, for many years, I've been saying ISO, and I've been saying ISO when it regards to camera, and then I would say ISO in work, even though ISO
the other way. Is it the other way around?
So it's capitalized, but it's ISO. ISO is how it say it. It's based off of the Greek god Isos.
Okay.
Yeah, Isos. And ISO is just a it's a government. It's a not government body. It's a privatized institution that has a lot of standardizations. So I'm pretty sure even in your work there's a lot of ISOs. If you ever go down the theory of like transporting and containering and like all of that, there's definitely going to be an ISO somewhere. So ISO is the standardization of the sensor, like it's a standardization that existed when film exists. It's an old thing. We just have to abide by it. It's one of the goddesses. It's there. The other thing is aperture.
Are we getting all Portal now as well?
Aperture science. Aperture science. Oh, actually, if you look at the Portal logo, it's
a shutter, isn't it? Or camera?
It's an aperture.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's the round thing, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's the aperture. We'll come back to what the aperture is. Don't worry, I got you. No.
Because that picture essentially resembles when the shutter opens and closes, right?
No, that's the last part. Shutter speed.
Hernandez.
So there's the three goddesses, right? Each have their special powers. ISO has the power to manipulate photons. It's a cool power to have. Not my favorite. Aperture is the power to manipulate light. Light. But my favorite power that you can get with photography is shutter speed, which is to manipulate time. Being a time lord is the best thing about photography. Man time.
Man time.
Man time. So these are the three goddesses. These are the three goddesses, and they all pay homage to the censor. Whatever they do, the censor will know about. The censor is end all be all. And this is the Triforce. Once you know, like everything that's leading up to this has been theoretical, but this is photography. This diagram right here, there's nothing else that I like that you need to know about photography. Oh, there are, but once you know this, you know photography across everything. Like there's no device that you can use that you cannot use to your advantage. Right, let's start with the ISO. So the ISO, let me just add another one here. The ISO is a standardization that, like I said, that that is used to feed light into. So everything that we do, all of that is all about light. So if we go back to this image, let's look at it one more time, right? All of this sensor, it's all about the sensor, but at the same time, it's all about light. Light is the key because light has all the color information. And that's the thing that we feed the sensor. That's the thing that they sacrifice into the sensor. The Dalima, and throwing light into the fire pit, sacrificing that light version. This is the ISO. The ISO is effectively manipulating photons. And the photons are you just telling the sensor that you need to just grab light wherever it comes in. Like just grab the photons in the atmosphere. Just grab the light. And the reason why the ISO is important is ISO is the reason why you can shoot photographs in low light.
So essentially, if I'm looking at the numbers now, 3200 is grab every single bit of light you can get. 80 exactly. Is take no light. I don't want any light.
So yeah, this is a camera from 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Its lowest range is 80, which means that I don't need to grab light from the photons from the atmosphere. There's enough light in the room. 3200 means that I don't see anything. I just need to grab photons so I can make sense of what's going on in the room. Which is why when you take a photo in the dark, it's hella noisy. Like there's noise and grain. It looks more like this photo. That's because that's just the phone. It's grabbing photons from anywhere it can, and it's just like trying to feed the sensor information that it can make sense of.
Whereas you'd want a 640, so it still has some of the clarity of whatever's dark, and not just granulating any form of color and throwing it on those bits of blackness.
So okay, so here's where it starts to get a bit tricky. So the 640 is not the range that you want. You want this. You want the 80. Let me tell you why.
When it's pitch black.
So this is a room. This is just sample shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is effectively the amount of noise that gets added to the photo. So 80 is it's clean. There's nothing on it. There's no dust on it, right? That's what we call noise. This is noise. This is just, it's a mess. So if you took that photo in the real world, right? If we took that photo as we are now, right?
Mm-hmm.
How dark is your room?
Yeah. I mean, it's partially lit.
Okay. Okay, might not be able to use this example, but in your camera settings, you have manual ISO and auto ISO. If you can find it, if you go to menu and then you go to, I think, photo settings.
Menu.
So
no. Multi-exposure, AF mode, AE metering. Nope, don't want that. No, back, I say. Oh my fucking god.
Trying to also. Let's see.
So I found one menu, and oh bloody hell! It's like it all has like a list of things.
Yeah, that it could be probably. So let's try this. Put the thing into M mode.
M mode.
M.
Yep.
There should be an ISO button. At the bottom.
Oh fuck me! Oh, back. Yeah, I see the ISO bit. How do I get to it?
So put it to M.
It's on M.
Make sure that you're in the photo mode. So half press the shutter. And then press and hold the ISO button.
That's the fucking ISO button. There is no ISO button.
Is it? Does it not have an ISO button?
Oh yeah. I see it now.
The front bottom left, right?
Yeah.
You press and hold that.
I figured it out. So yeah, I can press ISO and then it will let me fidget with it
with the dial, right? So put it to 100.
Yep.
And then take a picture. Take a picture pointing it towards the light.
The light on my ceiling, yeah.
Or any light, really.
Oh no, the battery's almost dying.
It's all right. You have your Huawei. We can do this with the Huawei as well.
Oh yeah, it took the picture.
Yeah, and you can see like it looks sort of normal. I don't know how bright your lights are.
How do I mean, it's a really dark picture. Really
really dark. But imagine,
but you can, see the little light in the top right or something.
But just imagine the situation where you are outside and it's really bright outside, right? If you take that with the ISO 100, right, you're limiting the amount of light that the sensor needs to collect. So that's why, like, ideally, you would want your ISO to be as close to 100 as possible. That's the ideal situation. But now change the ISO to 1600. I think yours goes up to 1600, right?
Mine goes up to 12800 or 12,800.
Yeah, I don't think that's the real number. That's the number. Okay, just use use 1200. The highest.
Use the maximum.
Yeah, use the maximum, and then take a photo.
Okay, let's see what we get now. Yeah, it's a bit like
it's gone to this thing, right? It looks like someone took some sprinkles and just like dabbed them onto your photo.
Yeah.
So that's the reason. So if you're in low light, you gotta have to push it to the higher ISOs, but you lose the clarity of your photo.
I get you.
Right, that's what ISO is for. It's you're collecting photons from the atmosphere, feeding it to the sensor, and being like, this is the amount, this is the light in the room. The lower the ISO number, the less the amount of photons that you have to collect to compensate. But the picture will be darker, but less noisier. But if you're in a bright situation, it'll be fine. If you're in a dark situation, you're going to have to bump up the ISO, but you lose a lot of detail and sharpness of your photo.
I get you now. I get you.
You introduce noise.
It's pretty much, you're in a pitch black room.
Yeah.
You can bomb all the ISO you want on it, but then it starts looking really grainy and horrible.
There we go. Practical. Let's bring out the tripod.
It's essentially, you see everything in the picture, but the picture looks like shit.
Pretty much. So like for me, my go-to is usually the range of 100 to 1600. Sometimes I push it to 3200 when it's really dark, but I know that photo is not going to really be. It's going to be a photo that has to be great content for me to push it towards a higher ISO. And the math behind that is, if you're really interested, it is just 2 to the power 1 times plus 100. No, 2 to the power 0. Okay, so everything plus 100. So 2 to the power 0, 2 to the power 1, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 2, 2 to the power 3, blah, 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 blah. The other way of doing it is you have ISO 100, and then ISO 200, and then ISO, Jesus, what's 2 to the power 2? What's the next one? Jesus.
200. Oh, was it 400?
400? Yeah.
Is it just essentially doubling, isn't it?
Yeah.
1600, 3200.
So the other way to do it mathematically, if you want to know the next one, you add the ones that came before it and add 100. That's the other way. That's the other way to do it. You will never need to do this math because we live in a world where everything's digital. You can literally spin it. But back in the day, and with like the new cameras that are coming out, the hipster cameras, you have to kind of do the math because they want you to feel like authentic and old school. But no, I ain't doing that. And between that, there's also sub cameras, and I believe yours does this as well. You can have a third step into that. So it'll be 125 here, and then 160. I think so. That's the next third. Anyway, you just have like more stops in terms of ISO. Not every camera has this. Just something that if you find it in the second settings and it says a third step or 2/3 step, that's what it means.
Okay. I just realized I have batteries literally on hand. I could swap out the batteries now.
Fantastic. So now we've done ISO. ISO is photons. You've mastered the art of photons.
I understand.
You have understand. Ooh, that's shock. Now is aperture. Aperture is all about the lens. This is the lens doing the business. So now you've learned like how the camera sensor, which is the ISO, does like the camera's information is governed by the ISO. That's what the body does, and then you get the sensor, the aperture, which is dictated by the lens. The aperture is simply the amount of light that comes through the lens. So with every lens, if you look at if you unscrew the lens from the camera,
yeah, yep,
and then you look through the lens, like I know the Nikon ones have a little dial that you can press on the end of the lens, the side that goes into the camera. I'm not sure.
I've got 2 dials on mine, or not dials, but like things.
It's like a lever. It's like a lever. Does this one have a lever at the end?
No.
Okay, because I can't remember the amount of the lens. Anyway, there's a hole in there, right? You can see it.
Yep, I see that hole.
That hole expands once you connect it to the camera. It becomes wider. Right?
You stick it in the hole, it gets bigger. I get you.
Yeah, it's like that, like the aperture science thing. Right?
Okay.
That's the aperture. The aperture is the amount of light that comes through the lens into your camera. Now, like we said, the Holy Trinity is the Triforce, and they govern the amount of light that comes into the camera. That's all the sensor cares about. So the aperture is that by controlling the light, you can control by opening and closing the aperture, you can control the depth of field. And this is where the thing starts to get complicated, right? Before we get to depth of field, there's something else that's called a focal length. right? The focal length is the distance between, let's bring up the camera again. The focal length is the distance between the lens, like there's a glass in the lens, right? That and the sensor, that is the focal length. So you see this number over here. Let's switch it. You see that number, this number, you have those numbers on your thing, on your lens, right? You still here? You alive?
Yeah, I'm muted. 55, 45, 35, 24, and 18.
That's the focal length.
Okay.
Right. That's the distance between the when you put them at that point to the sensor. So 24 millimeters to the sensor, and then and what's your maximum
on the lens?
Yeah,
this one has 55.
So when you spin it all the way to 55, you can see like it gets longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously you just increasing,
zooming in.
Yeah. So the adverse effect of increasing the focal length is if we look at oops, I unlocked the wrong thing. Where's the camera? Oops, I've lost it. There you are. Right. So we're back to your camera, right? This is the camera. Let's say it has a focal length of 24 millimeters. It means that you're much able to bring things closer to the camera, right? It's able to discern things that are closer to the camera, which means that when you look at the camera, you can look. There's a lot more information this way, right? But as you increase the focal distance, you start to find that your subjects, because of the way things are, it looks like the scene is a lot tighter. Even though you're capturing the same size, everything's like a lot bunched up, because you're there's a lot of physics involved. But let's just put it this way, right? The closer the focal length, the wider the information you can see, and the further the focal length, the tighter the information. Practical side of things, if you just put your finger right in front of your face, right, and then you look at your finger, the information in the background is blurred, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look at the background, the information on your finger, like you see more, but like you don't see the details of your finger. That is aperture. That is what you're doing with aperture.
I see. I getcha.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay. Let me bring this back to black. I've been writing in blue. So on the camera, you also have a ratio. It should be like 3.4 to 5.6 or something, right?
On where?
On the everything that's aperture related is on the lens. There should be a number that looks like 1, 2, like that.
No, mine just has 18, 24, 35, 45, and 55.
Look on the front of the lens. You know where the lens cap is?
SMC Pentax DAL 13556.
Oh, yeah, it's got 3556. Okay, so this number, the one part, the one is the ratio, like that is the focal length part, and the 3.456 is the maximum aperture, i.e. the wider the hole can be. So 1 over it's 1/3.5 to 1/5.6. And if you imagine 1 being a whole and 1/3.5 being somewhere like here, and 1/5.6 being here, like, well, that's a tiny hole. So this part is the 3.5, and that being the 5.6.
Mm-hmm.
That is what is happening to your aperture. So if we assume that this is the entire, like the maximum you can have, this is the maximum you can have here, right? Which is 1. Like, your camera's aperture fits into either 3.5, like this. I should have used a different color, to be honest. This range over here is where your camera, like how the maximum aperture that your camera can open to. This is where it's harder to understand unless you have like practical, which is why I set up some practical stuff. You can do it yourself. You can test it out. So
yeah, I think we might have to take a quick break.
Cool.
So I'll be back in like 30-ish minutes.
30?
Yeah.
All right. I'll pause it.
Okay. Right. I'll be very quick.
Okay. Cool.
Peace.
Bye.